February 1st, 2026, at precisely 1:47 a.m., marked the beginning of a chilling mystery. In an affluent residential district of Tucson, Arizona, an 84-year-old woman vanished from her own bedroom. The initial signs were subtle but ominous. A smart home security system's doorbell camera abruptly disconnected, followed 41 minutes later by a medical device losing its wireless connectivity to a phone. On her porch, a stark crimson stain hinted at a struggle, leaving behind a profound enigma that would captivate national attention for weeks. What the perpetrator failed to grasp was the intricate web of modern surveillance and data trails. Before approaching the residence, masked and armed, under the cloak of pre-dawn darkness, the individual made a crucial stop, a shopping trip to Walmart. This particular chain, it turns out, maintains an exhaustive record of every transaction and every customer's movement. This narrative unfolds how a single shopping excursion, meticulously documented by one of the most comprehensively monitored retail environments on Earth, began to converge with forensic evidence, transaction databases, and advanced genetic genealogy. These elements were poised to unmask an individual who believed the cover of night rendered them invisible. This is the story of Day 21, and the investigative net was tightening. Before we continue tracking this investigation, subscribe and hit the notification bell. At Crime Blackline Archive, we follow cases like this one in real time, bringing you every development as it unfolds. New updates every week, and if you've been following this case from the beginning, drop a comment below. We want to hear your theories. A woman, a routine, a final night. To understand what was lost on that February morning, you first need to understand who she was. An 84-year-old woman deeply rooted in her community, known for the warmth of her home and the consistency of her routines. She had built a life measured not in milestones and headlines, but in the quiet rhythms of daily existence. The familiar chair by the window, the phone calls with friends that stretched longer than intended, the Sunday mornings spent in the company of faith and community. She was a mother, a grandmother, a presence that anchored those around her. The kind of person whose absence leaves a silence that cannot be filled. She attended online church services with a friend every Sunday morning at 11 a.m. Never missed. She had dinner with family, welcomed her son-in-law's care, and returned home the way she always did, quietly, safely, on her own terms. Her daughter's public profile, as a prominent anchor on national television, had brought a certain degree of attention to the family over the years, but she herself lived modestly, without fanfare, without the expectation that the rhythms of her daily life would ever intersect with violence. That was the life she had built. That was the life that was taken from her on the night of January 31st, 2026. That evening, she left her home in a ride-sharing service to have dinner with her daughter, a routine family gathering, the kind that happens in millions of homes every week. The conversation was ordinary, the food was warm. The goodbye at the end of the night was the kind exchanged between people who fully expect to see each other again soon. Later, her son-in-law drove her home, waiting 2 minutes after she entered to ensure she was safely inside and the lights were on. At approximately 9:50 p.m. he departed. He had no way of knowing he had seen her for the last time. Over the next 4 hours, her activities were partially documented by technology. Her phone was in use and lights were activated in various rooms, captured by smart home sensors. There was no immediate sign of distress. She likely followed her evening routine, checking in with family, perhaps watching television, preparing for bed. The house was quiet. The neighborhood was quiet. Nothing from the outside suggested that anything was wrong, but somewhere in the darkness beyond her windows, a plan was already in motion. What happened next was not an accident, not a moment of rage, and not a crime of opportunity. It was planned. Meticulously, deliberately, and with a level of operational awareness that would only become fully apparent once investigators began piecing together the evidence. The architecture of a crime. To comprehend the unfolding of this case, one must first understand the meticulous planning behind it. Every detail was considered, every potential vulnerability minimized. On paper, It appeared to be a perfectly executed abduction. The suspect wore a full face mask, a balaclava that completely obscured their features, making facial recognition impossible and eliminating any chance of witness identification. Even in the recovered footage from the smart home security system, no skin was visible, only the mask and dark fabric completely concealing identity. No hair, no jawline, no distinguishing feature of any kind exposed to the air or to the cameras. Tactical gloves were worn, designed to leave no fingerprints, no DNA from skin contact, and no trace evidence on anything touched. When the individual manipulated the doorbell camera, opened doors and moved through the home, no prints or cellular material were left behind on surfaces. This was not the behavior of someone acting impulsively. This was someone who had studied the forensic process and made deliberate choices to counter it at every step. Timing was chosen with precision, not in the evening when neighbors might be active, nor in the morning when daily routines begin. The abduction occurred at 1:47 a.m., a statistical dead zone for human activity, when few people are awake, alert, or watching. Studies on human behavior and nighttime awareness consistently show that the window between 1 a.m. and 3 a.m. represents the lowest period of community vigilance. Streets are empty, neighbors are asleep. The probability of an unplanned witness encounter is at its minimum. This individual understood that. Darkness was deepest, visibility lowest, minimizing the odds of being seen or interrupted. No streetlights illuminate every corner of a residential district. No passing cars sweep headlights across a front porch at that hour. The neighborhood, for all its affluence and security infrastructure, was effectively blind at 1:47 a.m. And that was not a coincidence. That was a calculation. The security system was also targeted. The victim had a multi-camera smart home security system, the kind designed to capture everything and prevent such incidents. Yet at 1:47 a.m., the doorbell camera disconnected. And for the next 25 minutes, no video was recorded, or so the perpetrator believed. The fact that the individual knew the camera was there, knew its position, and took deliberate action to disable it before proceeding further indicates reconnaissance. Someone had studied the property. Someone had identified the camera locations. Someone had visited perhaps multiple times in the days or weeks prior, mapping out the obstacles and planning their removal. Even the victim's medical device was seemingly considered. At 2:28 a.m., the medical device's application indicated a disconnection from her phone. This device, a cardiac monitoring implant, connects to smartphone apps via wireless connectivity for remote monitoring by her medical team. Whether its disconnection was a pre-planned disabling or occurred during the struggle that left blood on the porch, the result was the same. Another layer of digital visibility was eliminated. This demonstrated a sophisticated awareness of technology that goes well beyond the average criminal profile. This individual understood that cameras are not the only witnesses in a modern home. Sensors, devices, applications, all of them report, all of them record, and all of them needed to be addressed. This was a methodical act by someone who understood that in the current era, avoiding human witnesses is only part of the challenge. Digital witnesses, cameras, sensors, GPS, wireless signals, also capture nearly every action. And yet, despite all of this careful preparation, despite the gloves and the mask and the chosen hour and the disabled cameras and the targeted medical device, a single catastrophic error was made. Not at the crime scene, not during the abduction itself, but before any of it began. The shopping trip that changed everything. To execute this carefully planned crime, equipment was needed. The mask, the gloves, a backpack for tools, and a holster for a weapon. A prepared individual would have acquired these items separately. Different stores, different days, different payment methods. Cash only, purchased weeks apart, leaving no single transaction that could be isolated and traced. That is what a truly careful person would have done. Instead, the individual went to Walmart. One store, one trip, one permanent record. This decision, seemingly minor in the context of an otherwise calculated operation, is almost certainly what will unravel the entire case. And understanding why requires understanding exactly how modern retail surveillance works, because most people profoundly underestimate it. The surveillance infrastructure of Walmart is extensive, in ways that are not immediately visible to the average shopper. Operating thousands of stores across the country, it processes hundreds of millions of customer transactions weekly, each creating a traceable data point that is logged, stored, and cross-referenced with dozens of other data streams. Upon entering such a store, individuals are recorded even before reaching the door. Parking lot cameras, some equipped with license plate recognition technology, capture every vehicle that enters the lot, logging the plate number, the make and model of the vehicle, the time of arrival, and the duration of the visit. This data is retained and searchable. Entrance cameras record faces, clothing, and movements from the moment a customer steps through the automatic doors. Inside, cameras are present in every aisle, positioned at angles designed not just for theft prevention, but for comprehensive behavioral mapping. At every register, cameras capture the transaction from multiple angles simultaneously, recording the customer's face, their items, and the precise moment of payment. In sections where outdoor gear, tactical equipment, and sporting goods are sold, exactly the categories relevant to this case, the camera density is typically higher, not lower. Beyond the cameras, every purchased item generates a transaction record that exists independently of any footage. Payments made with credit or debit cards link the purchase to the buyer's name, card number, billing address, the exact items purchased, the time of purchase, the specific register used, and the store location. This data is time-stamped, geolocated, and permanently stored in a centralized database that can be queried by product code, by store, by date range, by transaction amount, or by any combination of those variables simultaneously. Investigators do not need to watch hours of footage to find a specific purchase. They query the database, and the database returns a list. Even cash purchases are not anonymous in the way most people believe. The system records what was bought, when and where. Modern point-of-sale systems can correlate cash transactions with security footage from that register at that precise moment, meaning that even a customer who pays with untraceable bills is still photographed, their face captured clearly on camera, their movements through the store logged by the tracking systems. The absence of a card does not mean the absence of a record. It means a different kind of record, one built on visual data rather than financial data, but a record nonetheless. Walmart retains all of this information for extended periods, transaction databases spanning years, surveillance footage archived and accessible, license plate recognition data, entry and exit timestamps, loyalty program information when applicable. When law enforcement presents a search warrant in a high-stakes case involving a violent abduction, the chain cooperates fully and immediately. The legal infrastructure exists, the data infrastructure exists, and the corporate incentive to cooperate in cases involving elderly victims and national media attention is absolute. Think about that for a moment. Every measure taken to remain invisible at the crime scene, the mask, the gloves, the darkness, the disabled camera, was rendered irrelevant by a single shopping trip made under fluorescent lights in front of dozens of cameras, with a transaction system logging every item purchased. The perpetrator believed they had eliminated all the evidence. But they created the most important piece of evidence before the crime even began. Do you think the perpetrator had any idea how thoroughly that store would expose them? Drop your theory in the comments below. The evidence left behind. At 1:47 a.m., the doorbell camera disconnected, the first concrete timestamp of the crime. While such disconnections can be benign, caused by power fluctuations or connectivity issues, the timing and subsequent events made the benign explanation impossible to sustain. Federal law enforcement later recovered footage from this camera, and what it revealed was significant. The recovery itself was remarkable, and the story behind it matters. Initial reports following the disappearance suggested the footage had not been saved. due to the absence of a paid cloud storage subscription on the Nest camera account. Without a subscription, the assumption was that footage streamed locally but was not retained beyond the device's immediate buffer. However, FBI leadership refused to accept that answer. Engineers were pressed to examine the system at a deeper level, diving into remote servers, temporary caches, and partially transmitted data fragments that existed below the surface of what the standard user interface would ever display. What they found changed the trajectory of the entire investigation. Fragments of video had been partially transmitted before the camera was disabled. These fragments were recovered, reconstructed, and analyzed frame by frame. What they showed gave investigators their first real look at what happened in the hours before dawn on February 1st. The recovered footage depicted an individual in tactical clothing, black from head to toe, wearing gloves and a backpack. The figure moved with deliberateness, not urgency. This was not someone rushing. This was someone executing a plan. Investigators immediately recognized the backpack as the Ozark Trail model, a product sold exclusively through Walmart. The identification was based on the pack's distinctive shape, its specific external attachment points, and a design element unique to that product line. A holstered weapon, positioned unusually between the legs rather than on the hip or shoulder, was also visible. This carry method is not standard. It is not common. It is the kind of detail that is memorable precisely because it deviates from every conventional carry position. Investigators believe this unusual positioning may reflect specialized training or a deeply ingrained personal habit, the kind of detail that a firearms retailer might recall from a conversation with a customer. According to reports, investigators are believed to be showing photographs of that holster to gun retailers across the region, specifically because of its unusual positioning, though the full scope of that inquiry has not been officially confirmed. The footage showed the individual actively tampering with the camera, attempting to obscure it using landscaping elements near the front entrance. This is critically important for one reason. It indicates prior knowledge of the camera's existence and location. The perpetrator did not arrive and discover the camera. They arrived knowing it was there, knowing approximately where it was positioned, and having already formulated a method to address it. That is reconnaissance. That is someone who either visited the property before that night, accessed publicly available imagery of the home, or obtained information about the security setup through another means. At 2:12 a.m., 25 minutes after the initial disconnection, the camera's software detected motion but failed to record, suggesting it was still powered but had been physically obscured or redirected. At 2:28 a.m., 41 minutes after the camera first went dark, the victim's medical device application showed a disconnection from her phone. The signal simply ceased. No gradual fade, no intermittent loss, a clean cut. This disconnection could have occurred if the phone was destroyed, if the victim was moved beyond wireless range, if the device itself was disabled, or if the victim was transported from her bedroom to a vehicle. Each of these explanations leads to the same conclusion. In the 41-minute window between 1:47 a.m. and 2:28 a.m., she was forcibly removed from her home. That window is when everything changed. The sun rose on February 1st the way it always does, indifferent to what had occurred in the darkness before it. At 11 a.m., the victim was expected at her friend's home for their regular online church service, a ritual of connection and faith that had become a cornerstone of her weekly routine. She did not appear. Calls to her phone went unanswered. The silence was unusual enough that her friend reached out to the family immediately. At 11:56 a.m., relatives arrived at her home with keys, expecting to find her asleep or unwell, or simply having forgotten. What they found instead began the unraveling of every assumption they had carried through the morning. The house appeared mostly normal from the outside, no shattered windows, no obvious signs of entry. Inside common areas showed no overt evidence of struggle, but her car was in the driveway. Her phone was inside the house, not taken, not missing, simply sitting where she had left it. Her medical device showed its last timestamp at 2:28 a.m. hours earlier. and when relatives reached her bedroom, it became undeniable. Signs of violence were present. Biological evidence, a DNA mixture consistent with violent physical contact, was found at the scene. Forensic analysts noted, however, that this mixture presented significant challenges for analysis, with a laboratory in Florida working to isolate usable profiles from what is described as a complex biological sample. On the front porch, the victim's blood confirmed that she had been injured before being removed from the property. At 12:03 p.m., law enforcement was called. Federal law enforcement was notified within the hour. This was not a missing person case. This was an abduction. The investigative net, a substantial investigative force, was assembled and deployed with unusual speed. The combination of the victim's age, the visible evidence of violence, the disabled security system, and the connection to a prominent public figure accelerated federal involvement and the allocation of resources that might otherwise take days to materialize. Search teams were immediately dispatched to the surrounding desert terrain, a landscape that offers concealment, but also extreme conditions, heat, distance, and difficulty that make both survival and discovery equally challenging. Helicopters equipped with thermal imaging technology flew grid patterns over the vast county for days, scanning for heat signatures that might indicate a living person in a remote location. Among the aircraft deployed was a helicopter equipped with a wireless signal detection system, a technology capable of scanning for the specific frequency emitted by the victim's cardiac monitoring implant. The deployment of this technology was publicly acknowledged, drawing commentary from a high-ranking political figure who criticized the disclosure, arguing that announcing this capability could alert the perpetrator and lead them to disable or destroy the device. It was a reasonable concern from an operational security standpoint. Local law enforcement officials responded carefully, emphasizing their focus on the investigation. Dogs trained in scent tracking worked in coordination with ground teams, following trails that extended from the property outward in multiple directions. Divers were deployed to search bodies of water within a defined radius. Every abandoned structure, every remote outbuilding, every property that presented a concealment opportunity was visited, examined, and cleared. The victim was not found. The FBI also reached beyond the border. Investigators made contact with Mexican authorities, given the proximity of Tucson to the international boundary and the possibility that the victim had been transported south. This cross-border coordination added an international dimension to the search and signaled that investigators were not limiting their geographic assumptions. As the search continued and hope contended with the weight of what the evidence suggested, the victim's daughter, the prominent television personality, made emotional public appeals for her mother's safe return. These appeals generated significant media coverage and an enormous volume of tips from the public, each requiring assessment, prioritization, and follow-up. Investigators processed hundreds of leads in the first week alone, the vast majority of which led nowhere but each demanding attention. With the physical search yielding no results, the investigative focus shifted to identification. If she could not be found through terrain searches, perhaps the perpetrator could be identified through the evidence left behind. And that is when the Ozark Trail backpack became the central thread. Upon reviewing the doorbell camera footage, an investigator with specific knowledge of tactical and outdoor retail equipment recognized the backpack's design as the Ozark Trail model, sold exclusively through Walmart. This recognition transformed the investigation. It gave investigators something they had not had before, a commercial record. Not a partial record, not an inference, but a complete, searchable, legally accessible database entry corresponding to every single purchase of that exact item at that exact chain over a defined time period. Here is where a critical detail adds even more investigative power to this lead. The Ozark Trail backpack visible in the footage is a discontinued model. Walmart no longer carries it. This means the universe of transactions is not simply recent months. It is every purchase of that specific model made before Walmart pulled it from shelves. A discontinued product has a finite, closed transaction record. Every unit sold is accounted for. There are no new purchases being added to the database. The list of buyers is complete, frozen, and fully searchable. For investigators, a discontinued product is not a complication. It is a gift. The pool of potential suspects did not just narrow. It was sealed. Federal law enforcement released the doorbell camera footage 10 days after the disappearance, appealing to the public for assistance in identifying the individual or any of the equipment visible. The release accelerated cooperation at the corporate level. Simultaneously, forensic analysts spent days examining every pixel of the available footage, consulting with retail experts and tactical gear specialists, confirming beyond any reasonable doubt the specific Ozark Trail model and its exclusive availability through Walmart. Local law enforcement officials publicly confirmed the backpack as a promising lead, stating that surveillance video from multiple local Walmart stores was being actively reviewed. Walmart provided authorities with records of all purchases of that specific discontinued backpack model, a dataset with a definitive beginning and a definitive end, covering every transaction from the product's introduction to its discontinuation. For each card-based transaction in that dataset, investigators have the purchaser's name and billing address. From a name and address, they can access driver's license photos, vehicle registration records, property records, criminal history, and social media profiles. They can verify whether the individual lives in proximity to the victim's home and check for any prior connection to the victim or her family. For each cash transaction, security footage from the exact register at the exact time of purchase shows the purchaser's face, extractable, enhanceable, and submittable to facial recognition systems that compare it against millions of driver's license photos, passport images, and law enforcement mugshot databases. The perpetrator's purchase of multiple items, the Ozark Trail backpack, tactical gloves, a mask, and a holster, further refines the search beyond even the backpack's discontinued status. Combination purchases are far rarer than individual ones. A transaction including all visible equipment, bought together within a short time frame before the incident, would be the key. Investigators can generate lists of transactions that included both the backpack and tactical gloves, significantly narrowing the pool of potential suspects. Adding the holster purchase further reduces the candidates to a very small number. Where biology meets the database. Now consider the DNA evidence, where retail data and biology intersect to form something that is, for all practical purposes, impossible to escape. Investigators found a glove approximately 2 miles from the victim's home. It matched the style and color of the gloves visible in the doorbell camera footage. The discovery of this glove was significant not just as a physical artifact but as a biological one. DNA analysis of the glove's interior, where the wearer's hand had made sustained contact, yielded an unknown male profile, a clear, complete, analyzable sample. It is important to note at this point what the evidence does and does not confirm. The DNA profile extracted from the recovered glove is an unknown male profile with no match in federal databases. Investigators have not publicly confirmed that this profile is identical to the DNA mixture recovered from the victim's home. Those samples are being analyzed separately, and the complexity of the mixture at the residence has presented its own forensic challenges. What can be said is that both samples are being pursued simultaneously, and that investigators are treating the glove as a significant piece of evidence directly connected to the crime, given its proximity to the residence and its match to the style of glove visible in the footage. This DNA profile was submitted to federal DNA databases, CODIS, the Combined DNA Index System, which contains profiles from millions of convicted offenders and individuals arrested for qualifying crimes. No match was returned. This finding carries its own information. The perpetrator likely has no prior criminal record that would have placed their DNA in the system. For many investigations, a negative database result represents a dead end. But genetic genealogy changed that calculus entirely, and this case is positioned to benefit directly from that shift. At the victim's home, the DNA mixture recovered from the scene is undergoing analysis at a laboratory in Florida, with specific expertise in complex biological samples. The mixture is consistent with violent physical contact, but isolating a clean unknown profile from a mixture requires careful subtractive analysis, removing the victim's own known genetic contribution and identifying what remains. This work takes time. But investigators and forensic experts have specifically mentioned genetic genealogy as an active tool in this investigation, signaling that at least one usable unknown profile is expected to emerge from the analytical process. Genetic genealogy involves uploading a crime scene DNA profile to public genealogy databases, open platforms where individuals voluntarily share their DNA results for the purpose of finding relatives. These databases contain tens of millions of profiles, representing a significant fraction of the population across multiple generations. The crime scene DNA will not directly match the perpetrator, but it will match the perpetrator's relatives, second cousins, third cousins, people who share a common ancestor and are listed in the database under their own name, unaware that their voluntary participation in a genealogy platform is creating an investigative thread that leads directly to someone they are related to. Genetic genealogists then take those distant cousin matches and construct family trees, working backward through historical records, birth certificates, marriage records, census data, obituaries. They identify common ancestors shared between the crime scene profile and the database matches. Then they work forward through descendants of those ancestors, branch by branch, generation by generation, until they arrive at a list of candidates of the appropriate age, sex, and geographic location. This process is methodical, time-intensive, and highly effective. It has solved cold cases that went unsolved for decades, including the identification of the Golden State Killer after more than 40 years. Leading experts in the field have expressed clear optimism about this specific case, noting the quality of the DNA sample from the glove as well suited for genealogical analysis. Once a name surfaces through genetic genealogy, confirmation follows through conventional means: physical surveillance of the identified individual, collection of a DNA sample from a discarded item left in a public space, laboratory comparison against the crime scene profile. A confirmed match establishes probable cause for arrest, and from that point forward, the case builds through standard evidentiary procedure. What makes this case particularly formidable for the perpetrator is the convergence of both investigative threads operating in parallel. If genetic genealogy narrows the suspect pool to a small number of individuals, investigators can immediately check their purchase history at Walmart for the specific discontinued Ozark Trail backpack. A confirmed match between a genealogical candidate and a Walmart transaction record creates a connection that is not circumstantial. It is direct, documented, and legally ironclad. Conversely, if Walmart footage identifies a suspect first, their DNA can be collected and matched against the crime scene profile, independently confirming the connection through a completely separate evidentiary chain. Two lines of evidence, each sufficient on its own, each reinforcing the other, converging on a single individual. This is why investigators have expressed measured confidence. They are not hoping for a break. They are following two independent methodologies that are both progressing simultaneously. Pressure from every direction. While the forensic and commercial investigations progressed, the case was generating pressure from directions the perpetrator had not accounted for. Public attention at the scale this case attracted does not dissipate. It compounds. Every day, without a resolution, brought new media coverage, new public appeals, and new opportunities for someone who knew something to come forward. The victim's daughter continued her appeals, reaching an audience of millions through her public platform. The coverage was sustained and intense. A new ransom demand emerged around day 21, described as distinct from an earlier demand that had been deemed potentially illegitimate. This new demand was characterized by investigators as more sophisticated than its predecessor, involving a form of digital currency different from Bitcoin and containing graphic threats that investigators described as chilling. If legitimate, it carries two simultaneous implications. The victim may still be alive, and the perpetrator is monitoring the public coverage closely enough to respond to developments in the investigation. A perpetrator who is watching and communicating is a perpetrator who is making decisions, and decisions leave traces. Each new communication introduces new metadata, new behavioral patterns, and new potential forensic angles for investigators to pursue. The sophistication of the demand also suggests someone operating under increasing pressure. A person who had planned every element of this crime with meticulous care is now in a phase of the operation that by definition cannot be planned as thoroughly. The abduction went according to the plan. The disappearance of physical evidence at the crime scene went according to the plan. But the investigation that followed, the recovery of the camera footage from the cache, the identification of the discontinued Ozark Trail backpack, the DNA from the glove, the genetic genealogy, none of that was part of the plan. And now the perpetrator is improvising. Improvisation, under federal law enforcement pressure, at the scale this case has reached, is where fatal mistakes multiply. Day 21. The net closes. On day 21, all investigative threads were converging simultaneously. The Walmart transaction analysis had produced a refined list of purchase candidates, narrowed further by the discontinued status of the Ozark Trail backpack. Genetic genealogy was progressing through family tree reconstruction from the DNA recovered at the glove and the residence. DNA comparisons from the crime scene were active at the Florida laboratory. The footage from the doorbell camera had been analyzed frame by frame. The new ransom demand was being traced through its digital pathways. Thousands of public tips had been processed and assessed. The FBI's contact with Mexican authorities had opened a cross-border dimension to the search. Each of these threads independently represented a meaningful investigative avenue. Together, converging on the same timeline, they represented something the perpetrator had not anticipated. A complete, multi-dimensional portrait of their preparation, their movements, and their identity, built from the data trail left before they ever approached the victim's door. Somewhere within this convergence is the individual who planned and executed this crime, who studied the property and identified the cameras, who chose 1:47 a.m. and dressed in black and wore gloves and brought a mask and carried a weapon, who believed that disabling a camera erased the evidence, that darkness and tactical preparation were sufficient to disappear from a world blanketed in surveillance. They overlooked one thing, not the cameras at the crime scene, not the blood they left on the porch, not the DNA transfer that occurs in violent physical contact, but the evidence created before the crime began. The preparation, the purchases. The walk through a Walmart under fluorescent lights, buying a discontinued backpack and tactical gloves and a holster, while cameras recorded every aisle and a transaction system logged every item. The fatal mistake was not made at 1:47 a.m. It was made days or weeks earlier in a brightly lit store by someone who chose convenience over caution. Someone who bought a discontinued product, a product whose entire sales history is finite, closed, and permanently accessible. That single decision to walk into the most surveilled commercial environment in the country with a shopping list for a crime transformed a meticulously planned abduction into a solvable case. The perpetrator thought they could disappear into darkness. They thought the mask would defeat facial recognition, that the gloves would prevent DNA transfer, that disabling cameras would erase the record of what happened. But they forgot that in this era, surveillance extends far beyond cameras. It lives in transaction databases, in genetic genealogy platforms, in the parking lot recognition systems of retail chains, in the fragmented cache servers of smart home devices, in the wireless transmission logs of medical implants, and critically, it lives in the discontinued product records of a retail chain that logged every single unit ever sold and still has every one of those records. The perpetrator believed a discontinued product meant an old forgotten item, a backpack that blended in and left no trail. What it actually meant was a closed list, a finite universe of buyers, a database with a beginning and an end. and that list is in investigators' hands right now. The victim deserves to come home. Her family deserves answers. The community that watched this case unfold over 3 weeks, gripped by the uncertainty of what had happened to an 84-year-old woman taken from her own bedroom in the middle of the night, deserves resolution. And the individual who believed they had planned the perfect crime is about to learn what every investigator in this case already knows. In this era, there is no such thing. The evidence is always there. You just need to know where to look. And right now, with the convergence of genetic genealogy, Walmart transaction analysis, DNA comparison, and active federal operational deployment, investigators are looking in exactly the right places. If you have any information regarding this disappearance, if you recall seeing someone purchasing the Ozark Trail backpack or any of the other items described, if you recognize anything about the individual in the doorbell camera footage, or if you have any knowledge of the victim's current location, please contact local or federal law enforcement immediately. A substantial reward is being offered for information leading to her safe return and the arrest of those responsible. Every detail matters. Every memory matters. The tip that breaks this case open may already be in someone's mind right now. If this investigation left you wanting answers, subscribe to Crime Blackline Archive and hit that notification bell. We will be here when the next development breaks. We will be here when this case reaches its conclusion. Like this video, share it with someone who is following the case, and drop your theory in the comments right now. Do you think the Walmart transaction data will be the thread that closes this? Or will genetic genealogy get there first? And did the discontinued status of that backpack surprise you? Because it surprised investigators too. And it may be the detail that makes this case airtight. We read every comment, and in cases like this, the conversations in the comment section matter. These are not just stories, these are real people, real lives, and real families waiting for answers that are within reach. We will see you in the next investigation.